So for today's video, we will be talking about storyboarding, or actually writing the story in total. What goes into this could be like the characters, the setting, the background, names of the characters. Different things can make up a story. You don't have to have everything in the beginning, but just a general idea. So to start off with, you put out ideas like, I want my story to be in the real world or a fantasy world. That is a great start. Then you have to consider, does it follow the same rules as the world we live in currently? Or does it have its own set of rules like gods, religion, gravity, just normal things that might be different in your new world? Continuing with that thought, things like the weather, atmosphere, vegetation, zoology, geography, astronomy, the physical space of the story, physics, anthropology, any environmental challenges, technology, and then what can be considered like their home, Like, do they live on a spaceship? Do they live in a house? Do they live in a car? Different things like that will set your narrative for your story. The next important thing would be the genre. So the story that I'm going to be using as an example today will be a thriller, suspense, and psychological horror. So you have to consider those for whenever you're creating your story. You want to consider your genre whenever you're making your story so you don't get too far off the topic. Now, types of characters that you will want to consider are your 7 main types. Here are 7 types of characters that most stories have, if not all of them. First would be the protagonist. It's the main character of your story. Now, they don't have to be like a symbol of like heroism. They could be a villain. They could be any kind of character. It's just the main character that you will be presenting in your story. The second would be the antagonist, and they are the main conflict of the story. So they're the other half of the protagonist. They just go against everything that they are going towards. Now, number 3 is the love interest. It is supposed to be representing like the protagonist's object of desire. It could be a romantic partner or even platonic. Sometimes it's platonic. And then number 4 is the deuteragonist. I do not know how to pronounce it, but he or she is not as important as the main character, but it is still a main character in the sense of pushing the protagonist forward in their story. Number 5 is the confidant. He or she are not the main character, but they are still important. They are a support system, like a best friend for the main character. Number 6 is a foil. This character is not an antagonist, but is the polar opposite of the protagonist. So different personality. Number 7 is the tertiary character. They're not really a background character, but they're still an assistant or helper. They're just not really heavily linked to the story as a whole. Now, to go into further details about these kinds of characters, there's static characters. They're a character that remains the same throughout a story. A round character, they undergo like a significant amount of changes throughout the story and are often not opposed to change. A stock character is a character that is recognizable due to its common traits, so like cliche or stereotypical. A flat character is more commonly associated with a tertiary character, but are an aid or a helper. Then there's a mentor, who is supposed to help the protagonist slowly in their journey or train their protagonist. The reason all this information is so important is due to the structure of your story. Without that information beforehand, your story could be with loose ends or without your story being fully linked together. Now that you have these characters in mind, next is the naming of your characters. So if you want a significant meaning behind their names, make sure that you also think of the location of your characters. So for my story, it's going to be in Russia. I don't know the time frame yet, but all of my characters will have either Russian, Slavic, or depending if they've migrated to this location, they will have a foreign name, or maybe they have an ancestral name because they're moving back after their family had moved away. Stuff like that. Especially for your characters, you don't want all of them to have like the same surname or similar names in general, unless it's a significant point of the story. If they have a specific meaning behind the name, make sure that it is relevant to your story. Now, you don't have to have like 20 million characters to have a story. There could be background characters, they could be nameless. In the end, the biggest part is to make sure that you have your characters, their names, and their backstories. Otherwise, your story can't begin without this important information.